Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Ipshita Bansal from BPS Women's University, Sonipat, Haryana. Today, we will be discussing about the module Techniques of Strategic HR Planning of the paper Strategic Human Resource Management. After studying this module, students will be able to understand the workforce planning process, how an organization can predict its future business activity, how to forecast the likely supply of available workers from inside and outside the firms, how to develop action plans to address gaps between labor supply and labor demand. The basic rationality of labor force predictions is the huge incubation window in the evolution of proficient experts. Strategizing, knowledge sharing and indoctrination can be expedited if such predictions could be made with ample time in hand. This guarantees the presence of the needed labor force both in terms of quality and quantity at the time in question. One of the other prime requirements of manpower forecast is to tackle the fluctuations in the availability of a skilled professional market. The labor force market is also plagued with long maturity periods and is defined by the huge gap in the demand and supply curve, with long lags in the supply side and short lags on the demand side. Therefore, inventory is to be estimated in order to satisfy the demand. If that does not happen, there is high probability that the workforce when might cause variance in the professional skill gathering frequency. As a result, there may be serious issue of a large set of skilled labor going jobless or settling with professions they don't have training or expertise in. Labor forces are designed to ensure rectification of workforce variance. Manpower demand forecasting is a technique to approximate the upcoming labor force requirements of appropriate quality and exact number. Personnel planner should include both quantitative and qualitative approaches while doing manpower demand forecasting. Today, both the routes complement one another. It provides a holistic prediction by compiling the augmentations of workers and experts. As the pioneer business models are dynamic, and despite the fact, however foolproof the planning is, there is always a certain unknown angle to the deal. Hence, predicting an exact result is meaningless and almost impossible. The need of the hour is to carefully analyze the trends in variations in other firms and accordingly develop a plan to tackle the current climate. Workforce forecast is cardinal also because the elasticity of substitution among numerous skills tend to be near at zero in short term. Therefore, manufacturing of commodities and utilities requires different types of expert manpower in accurate ratio. In such situations, even a small shortage of labor in any type of skilled expertise would adversely affect the manufacturing of commodities and utilities within the economic scope of the country. Workforce predictions will aid in avoiding similar types of scenario by analyzing the upcoming possible shortages and thus take the necessary measures. Let's now discuss types of forecasts. First is brief span or short term forecast. Brief span forecasts are those predictions which are credible under the duration of 24 months. They are very crucial at the grassroots, microscopic level, that is company level or departmental level. Second is moderate span or medium term forecasts. The horizon of planning for moderate span forecasts generally range between 24 to 60 months. The establishments involved in consulting the government and weaving a safety net to cope with the fluctuations of the global capital flow and overall political scenario find this forecast essential. Third is continual or perennial, that is long term forecasts. Predictions for the duration of more than 60 months are named as continual or perennial forecasts. These are beneficial in skill acquisition strategy, planning for requirements of highly skilled professional categories of manpower are forecasted on long term basis. The continual predictions prove very crucial in setting of the framework of professional strategies of a firm, keeping in sync the changes in deficient manufacturing, shift in technology and main organizational undertakings. Let's now discuss about manpower forecasting techniques. Forecasting is not an exact science and it is always rare to forecast exactly right. Given this uncertainty, it is usually best to construct estimates as a range with low probable and high estimates, and then recalculate those estimates as the external and internal environments change. Along with the firm's assumptions about its workforce needs, creating and implementing workforce plans is easier in more stable organizations and more challenging when a company faces rapid changes. So, what is qualitative demand forecasting? The stark difference in qualitative route as compared to the quantitative route is due to the fact that the manpower predictions are based on the experiences of the experts and less statistical. It is subjective in nature and endeavors to compile the ambitions, expertise and skills of the staff with current and upcoming human resources of a firm. The HR supervisors might depend on assistance of consultants for labor force forecast in anticipation of future manpower requirements both in big and small companies. Supervisor discretion. This is the most popular approach to qualitative manpower demand forecasting. The method is not at all complex. Following methods include supervisors collaborating together and deliberating to arrive at the future number of manpower demand. Small and large scale organizations may resort to this approach. This can be tackled in two different ways. First is lower to higher, that is bottom up approach. Under the lower to higher bottom up approach, first level supervisors predict the demand of the labor force for their departments and send their requests to higher management. After this, the senior management reviews and takes decision. Second is higher to lower, that is top down approach. Under this approach, senior management predicts labor force requirements for various departments and for the firm as a whole. Then the figure is sent to the subordinate managers and supervisors for their feedback and final decision is taken. Let's discuss Delphi technique. The development of Delphi method goes back to 1950s by the Rand Corporation, Santa Monica, California. The Delphi technique commences with a bunch of straight queries regarding a particular problem. These queries further are passed on to professionals. The answers of the experts to these queries are made precise and consolidated. Based on this, another batch of queries is formulated and passed around to the same group of professionals, putting emphasis on the absence of any clash on the area of acceptance and non-acceptance. Delphi technique is detailed in approach. Owing to this very fact, the believers of the quantitative theory question this route. The aim of Delphi technique is to forecast upcoming circumstances by consolidating the individual expert opinions of professionals. It ensures no face-to-face interactions with professionals. This is because certain people get colored by external influences, resulting in compromise of relevant ideas. Delphi technique is facilitated by an intermediary who provides the professionals with a logical sequence of queries regarding the predictions topped with formal follow-up to each professional. With each round of written query, every professional who is forecasting also lays down the presumptions around an issue. They are also provided with the similar kind of knowledge base compiled by each of the different professionals whose profiles aren't matched with the given raw information. Nobody is demeaned as it is strictly a confidential survey. The Delphi method is effective in improving and clarifying the collective judgment of experts. Any professional on the globe can participate in the Delphi method. The diagram shown here details about the process of the Delphi technique. It starts with leader identifying judgment issues and developing a questionnaire. Next is prospective participants are identified and asked to cooperate. Then leader sends a questionnaire to willing participants who record their judgments and recommendations and return the questionnaire. After that, leader compiles summaries and reproduces participants' responses. Leader sends the compiled list of the judgments to all the participants. Then participants comment on each other's ideas and propose a final judgment. Leader looks for consensus and may perhaps again send the compiled list of judgment to all the participants, and the next two steps may follow. After this, leader accepts consensus judgment as group's choice. Highlights of Delphi technique. The questionnaire is in written form and strictly confidential. It is more convenient for the participants to put their responses. Individuals from diverse backgrounds brainstorm on same issues. It is comparatively free of the societal stigma, orthodoxy, external factors, and peer inhibition. The procedure fosters individualistic thought process and slow metamorphosis, concluding in legitimate deductions leading towards accurate predictions. This technique is also helpful in generating consensus out of the divergent opinions of hostile groups. It is also helpful to keep focus directly on the issue. Professionals are enabled to be a part of mutual decisive discussion covering a plethora of angles. It promotes logic and meaningful arguments. Repetition of the process leads to the recap of all the arguments and observations by colleagues. So, let's now see what are the drawbacks of Delphi technique. Data is captured within a certain section of the gentry and might not be reliable and properly sourced. Under this method, maximal and minimal points are always eliminated. Participants choose moderate path in order to arrive at the consensus. This is an expensive technique and requires requisite expertise in writing feat. It necessitates strong dedication from the participants. Let's now talk about nominal group technique. Nominal group method is otherwise known as NGT technique. It is a structured method of group brainstorming that encourages contributions from every member. Like Delphi method, nominal group method also includes an array of professionals. The chief characteristics that distinguishes the two is that under Delphi technique, professionals cannot have a direct communication. According to the nominal group method, professionals sit together and list their own ideas. While writing, they are allowed to discuss among themselves to assess the questions. There is an open way of communication to validate the queries. The coordinator acts as a catalyst, encouraging the professionals to have mutual discussions and constructive criticism. The pointers of such declamations are compiled on a flip chart. Thus, it turn induces motivation in the lukewarm section of the group, ending in agile solutions or references. After this discussion, professionals are requested to grade their ideas on the gravity of urgency. The conclusion is then logically assessed depending on the grades. This technique, through interaction, paves the way to inspired learning and coming to a conclusive end to a healthy discussion. The coordinator has a final say in the most appropriate path to be charted. Let's now understand through this diagram the nominal group technique. The first step starts with a small group of 4 to 5 people gathering around a table. Leader identifies judgment issue and gives participants procedural instructions. Then participants write down all ideas that occur to them, keeping their lists private at this point. Creativity is encouraged during this phase. Leader asks each participant to present ideas and writes them on a blackboard or flip chart, continuing until all ideas have been recorded. Participants discuss each other's ideas, clarifying, expanding, and evaluating them as a group. After that, participants rank ideas privately in their own personal order and preference. The ideas that ranks highest among the participants is adopted as the group's judgment. As there are advantages and disadvantages associated with any technique, nominal group method is no exception. The most obvious advantage of this method is that it provides opportunities for equal participation of group members to respond to and clarify their ideas. It tries to include diverse viewpoints of experts. This method generates lots of ideas, but the major drawback of this method is that many times it does not converge to conclusion. Due to simple averaging of viewpoints of a group of experts, extreme views are masked. Now let's come to the statistical methods. First is proportion variation analysis. Proportion variation analysis studies the juxtaposition of the staff resource to the assigned job index and compares the number of employees to a workload index. It takes into consideration typical agents affecting a corporate like the aggregated output and the output ratio, which is the quotient of the aggregated output by the number of staff. The output ratio is helpful in approximation of manpower demand. This is one of the most agile prediction techniques. This incorporates researching about the proportion of number of people working to the corresponding sales in the interior. This ratio is used to estimate future manpower requirement. However, it overlooks any technology variation, general factors and other elements that may depreciate the production. Now we come to the retrogression or regression analysis. It takes into account the working of two connected sequences. It studies the changes of one entity as an aftermath of changes in other entities. For instance, this technique establishes the commonality between one entity, say staff number, and another, say production, by the calculation of the impact factor of 2. The usage of this technique starts with a sequence on cost analysis with values for each entity. Regression model includes a trend of variation depending on past productivity betterment fashions. The imperial prediction eases out strategizing and recruitments, indoctrination and self-betterment programs. This ascertains that the marketing workforce is available at the time of need. This technique is beneficial also to calculate the statistics of combination of labor in various genres. Now we come to scatter plots. Scatter plots show graphically how two different variables like revenue and sales, person staffing levels are related. For the purpose of forecasting labor demand, scatter plots help firms determine if a factor has historically been related to staffing levels. This information is then used to determine what staffing levels should be changed as the factor changes. This is related to correlation coefficients and regression analysis. Assume that new housing developments are being built in the area served by telecom sector, a private telephone service provider. A company wants to forecast its future requirements for telecom operators, and knowing the fact that as the population increases, the number of operators should be increased to serve the population better. The HR planning expert collects data from 6 other localities to understand that how many operators will be required to serve the need of the given population. Table 1 summarizes these numbers. In this diagram, we can see the example of a scatter plot. It shows the population of the locality in horizontal line and number of telecom operators in vertical line. Each point on the graph reflects one company. Notice that nearly a straight line can be drawn between the points, as we have done on the graphs. This leads us to conclude that there is a direct, if not perfect, relationship between the two factors. That is, the number of people that can be served is directly related to the number of operators. Therefore, the line can be used to predict the different staffing levels needed to serve the different population levels. Factors to be considered while forecasting an organization's workforce need. The first factor is current and past trends. The previous business performance is an excellent predictor of future trends. particularly if the business has been around for several years. Examine the budget and profit from previous years and then determine if that will meet or exceed these numbers this year. If so, organization may need to hire new staff members. Evaluate past data to determine how many employees will need to complete each duty. Second factor is industry trends. If the business is new or top management believes that current data is not sufficient, consider looking at industry trends instead. If industry is expanding rapidly, they will need to hire new employees to keep up with potential growth and to ensure that they can compete with other businesses. Industry trends cannot tell everything. The next factor is business goals. The business goals should be a major determining factor in forecasting manpower. If organization plans to downsize, they may not need to hire anyone. But if they are opening a new office, adding another area of specialization, or planning to increase their productivity, they are likely to need new employees. Carefully evaluate the specific goals and then consider the minimum and maximum number of employees that would be required to fill each role and ensure that business meets its goals. The fourth factor is profitability and budget considerations. If an organization is struggling with lean economic times or trying to save money to expand its business, they may need to balance the need to hire competent employees with the goal of saving money. The distribution of labor among the current workforce can help an organization to determine the least number of employees they need if the primary goal is to avoid excessive hiring. Consider whether current employees can take on new assignments and whether they would still need to hire someone if they spread duties across several employees and departments. Let's now summarize what we have understood in this module. The process of predicting sensitizes supervisors to any variation and restricts them in spending extravagantly into labor force investment and aids in focusing more on accomplishing the firm's mission. Forecasting the number, types, and quality of employees needed to execute the business strategy is critical for effective staffing. Both qualitative as well as quantitative methods are available for forecasting workforce requirements. Setting talent goals and objectives that are consistent with the firm's staffing strategy and talent philosophy are important goals of the planning process. The assessment of the organization's external labor environment and a company's own talent strengths and shortcomings can influence its competitive advantage and the business strategies which it is likely to pursue successfully. Hence, accurate forecasting of workforce needs is imperative for smooth functioning and growth of the firm. It is important to determine the size of the recruitment staff and resources that will be needed to secure the appropriate budget and resources before the staffing initiatives begin. Although this is particularly critical before an expansion effort or the hiring of a single individual to ensure that hiring goals can be met and the HR manager can ably understand what to expect from the staffing process. Thank you.